hottest desert in the world that required genetic adaptations throughout the years, all the way to entire towns that are contaminated from their past. Welcome back to Bumblebee. Let's dive right into the top 10 impossible places on Earth people actually live. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Tibetan Plateau. It is well known that when a person is at altitudes that are higher than 2,400 meters or 8,000 feet, there are negative effects on the body, such as altitude sickness or high altitude pulmonary edema. It's not something that just anyone can do without experiencing side effects, and that is exactly why those who live in the Tibetan Plateau are so incredible. Often referred to as the roof of the world, the Tibetan Plateau sits at an average of 4,500 meters or 14,800 feet. It's covered in glaciers and sees more hail than it does rain or snow because of these heights. Despite all of the challenges that would come with living in an environment like this, nomadic herdsmen are dispersed throughout this region, even in the most inhospitable regions such as the Changtang region, where the altitude is even higher than the average and the temperatures are the lowest out of the entire plateau, leaving little to no vegetation besides grass for livestock. I think one of the reasons why this place, despite its seemingly inhospitable environment, is still inhabited is because of the fact that the earliest human occupation of the plateau is thought to have happened around 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. That's some very deep roots, and it's a clear testament to those that still live there. In our number 9 spot today we have Centralia. Located in Pennsylvania, this town is referred to as one of the gateways to hell. That is due to the fire that spread in an underground coal mine underneath the town in 1962. Despite the years it's been, the fire still blazes underground, which causes the smoke and poisonous gases to rise up from the ground, not only causing an eerie appearance, but also a very serious health hazard. The temperatures can be so hot in the area that one guy's backyard was measured at 626 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes the fire will also burn through supports underground, which in the end turns into a sinkhole. This has caused pets, wildlife, and residents to unsuspectingly get swallowed up into the hole. In 1984, the US government ordered a total evacuation of the town, but there was a handful of residents who refused to leave, and they even went to court over their right to stay in the town for as long as they live. In our number 8 spot today we have Kabwe. Located in Zambia, this place has been described as the world's most toxic town. The toxins in the town are due to the previous century of mining and smelting, which led to generations being exposed to unbelievable amounts of toxins and a mass lead poisoning. The plants closed in 1994, but at that point, the damage had already been done. The population of 220,000 people that still live here are exposed to lead in the dust and soil that is 10 times the US safety limit, but they also stay out of necessity. At this point in time, the World Bank is now conducting a $65 million remediation project, and while that is great news, unfortunately nothing can be done for all of the people who had to deal with this for the last century and a half. In our number 7 spot today we have Wittenoom. This place in Australia is the home of a former blue asbestos mine, which is exactly what makes it one of the most contaminated places in the country. I mean this literally. The roads were paved with asbestos, even after the mine shut down in 1966. While the city was once the home to 20,000 residents, the population dropped significantly after the deaths of 300 former mine workers from mesothelioma. Apparently it was decided that it would be too expensive to clean up the town, so instead the government just declared it unfit to inhabit and took it off the maps. While most people have since left the town, it is said that 3 residents refused to leave and still remain in the almost completely abandoned town. In our number 6 spot today we have the Danakil Depression. The Danakil Depression is a part of the Afar Triangle in Ethiopia, and it is a geological depression that came about as a result of Africa and Asia moving apart. The divergence of 3 tectonic plates caused rifting and volcanic activity. This place is the hottest place on Earth in terms of average year-round temperatures, and it is also one of the lowest places on Earth at 100 meters below sea level. There are active volcanoes in the area, there are salt springs, sulfur springs, and it only gets about 4 to 8 inches of rain every year. What I'm saying is that this place is stunning and has an incredibly rich geological history, but it isn't very hospitable. Despite that, there are people who call this place home. The Afar people have called this area home for many years, and of course that poses the question of how. The biggest industry in the Danakil Depression is salt, and many of the people who live here will mine salt with their hands and then take a 2-day camel journey into the next town to sell it. The people who live here also have to deal with an average temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, but sometimes it gets as hot as 50 degrees Celsius. Somehow they have overcome the odds and the obstacles and managed to thrive in this extreme environment, and it is said that this was made possible over the centuries by their ability to adapt to need less food and water than other humans. Honestly, it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever heard. In our number 5 spot today, we have La Oroya. Located in Peru, this town has a population of 30,000 people, despite the metal smelter contamination that has been seen since 1922. The smelter closed in 2009 after the company that ran it declared bankruptcy, but here's how that happened in the first place. The American-owned company ran out of money because they had to fund the environmental cleanup and the anti-pollution measures. Seems like maybe they should have chosen a different path. Seems like it didn't pay off to pollute someone else's air. I guess they forgot that there's consequences for actions. It still remains as one of the most polluted areas in the entire world, and the toxic metals have gone on to infect the water, the soil, and the air. While it is completely unsafe to live there, people still do, and sadly, they suffer the extreme adverse effects of it. In our number 4 spot today, we have St. Kilda. St. Kilda is the most remote settlement of the British Isles, and it is so isolated that it is often cut off by storms for weeks and sometimes even months at one time. That is most likely the reason as to why the previous inhabitants had developed a culture, economy, and government that was completely separate and different to their English rulers. Unfortunately, between missionaries and officials coming to the island in an attempt to change their ways of life that were working perfectly fine for them, their sources of income dwindling, births not being able to keep up with the death rate, and the immigration rate combined, as well as the inevitable disease-ridden tourists coming to their island for whatever reason, things for those who once lived on the island changed drastically, and it was decided that they would have to evacuate the island in 1930. Since then, people have tried to resettle the island, but none have remained permanently, likely because of the isolation. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Siwa Oasis. Siwa is an urban oasis between the Tibetan Depression and the Great Sand Sea in the Western Desert. This oasis is one of Egypt's most isolated settlements, but it is the home to around 33,000 people. The residents have developed a unique and isolated desert culture and language called Siwi, but they are also fluent in the Egyptian dialect of Arabic. The oasis isn't necessarily a super popular tourist destination, as the closest city is Cairo, and the oasis is around a 5-hour bus ride away and is, of course, in the middle of the desert, but those who do take the trip certainly aren't disappointed. If visiting, you can enjoy some locally grown dates and olives, which I can only imagine are incredible. You can swim in Cleopatra's Bath, which is a mineral spring, and you can even stay at the Desert Eco Lodge, which is built from mud and salt. Tourism is actually a really vital source of income for the oasis, so visitors are welcomed. Because of how isolated Siwa is, the culture and traditions of the people who live here really have been preserved, which would make it such an interesting and wonderful place to visit. If I ever get the incredible opportunity of going to Egypt, I think Siwa would be on the top of the list of places to visit. In our number 2 spot today, we have Zabol. This city is located in Iran, and it is an absolute hotspot for dust storms. The summer season is where the worst of it is seen, with what is known as the quote 120-day winds. This is when dust and other matter absolutely bombards the city, which is due to the disappearance of the wetlands as well as the extremely high temperatures seen in the region. These dust storms aren't just inconvenient, they're actually very dangerous for those who live in the area. So much so that every year officials hand out thousands of air pollution masks to help prevent the damage that these storms can cause to the lungs. In 2016, the city was named the most polluted city in the world by the World Health Organization, and a study in 2017 even found that the damage from breathing this air for 30 minutes outweighs the benefits of 30 minutes of cycling, meaning it is exceptionally detrimental. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Galapagos Islands. Okay, this one is my favorite on this entire list because the story is just so crazy. Basically, the Galapagos Islands were pretty inhospitable to life, and you might be thinking, well, things live there now, so how could that be true? These islands emerged in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, sort of as the cap on still active volcanoes. That still active part is definitely key there. The heat from the volcanoes basically sterilized them, and not only this, but they were 600 miles from land. Everything that lives on the island now naturally found its way there. Plants with seeds who flew through the wind, animals that rode in somehow on a current, vegetation that came in on the back of a turtle. It truly is just remarkable. Of course, humans have interfered now and brought some different species, but even so, this story is just so cool. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!